the recording. Okay.
So hello, everybody, to the OT and PT group today. We are stepping a little outside the boundaries of not talking about journals. We are actually going to talk with a really exciting guest who is right up our alley with technology and tools that we can use for tracking and monitoring activity for our people with long COVID and myalgic encephalomyelitis that specifically have post-exertional malaise. So welcome Harry Leeming to our group. We're really excited to have you here today. Briefly, I just want to give you a tiny bit of information just so our participants know a little bit about you, that you are the founder and CEO of Visible, which is an activity tracking platform for long COVID and ME. You have lived experience with long COVID, and you previously worked in technology startups and as a Formula One engineer. So that's very impressive, and we're really glad that we have taken you into our community of practitioners. So welcome, and tell a little bit more, because we'd love to hear more about what your background is.
Awesome. Yeah, I will. Actually, I can share my screen at the same time, and then we can you see that all right? All good? Awesome. So yeah, so I'm Harry. Yeah, I'm the founder of Visible. And just as Amy was saying, I spent my short-ish career, the last 5-10 years in the tech industry, particularly in Silicon Valley, designing and scaling up consumer electronic products. I didn't previously have a background in healthcare, and really my journey has started with my COVID infection 2.5 years ago. And this space is now something that has sharply come into focus for me. I mean, I would also add my stepmom has actually had ME for 2 decades. So it's something that I've been aware of in the background, and now that it's affected me has really made me think a lot harder about the space and how I can help. I think, like many patients, the experience is a really tough one. There's minimal recognition, there's minimal treatment out there, and really there's limited to no tools to help people manage what is a very life-changing condition. So over a year ago, I was well enough to start Visible, which is a digital care platform designed specifically for long COVID and CFS.
I'm sorry to interrupt. One second. Can we have everybody mute themselves, because we're getting some background noise? So I should have announced that earlier, but if everybody could just mute themselves, that'd be great.
Although if you want to ask a question or jump in, definitely happy to be interrupted. Cool. So so back in March last year, we actually ended up raising a substantial amount of funding from health tech investors around the world to build Visible. And we brought together some of the leading research in the space. I'm sure these names will all be pretty familiar to you guys. And you'll see that we've got names from both the US and Europe, and from those that have been in the space for decades, like Todd versus David Petrino, who's more recently entered this space. And then we're also working closely with research institutions. So we actually have an observational study up and running already using Visible with University of Liverpool, with Physios for ME in the UK. And we actually have a lot more research partnerships lined up, which I'm really excited to be able to speak about in a couple of months' time. But I think really important for me to say that the mission behind Visible and what we're trying to do is to help better understand these conditions. Half our team have long COVID or ME, and we're really very keen that what we do, the insights that we find, make it into peer-reviewed, published papers, and really with the view that by helping patients better understand their conditions, they can help, they can manage it better. From researchers, they can understand these conditions, they can move forwards better treatments. And then, also for you guys to be able to help understand these conditions better, so you can better guide patients. So what do we do at Visible? We are using wearable technology to help patients measure and manage their own condition. And we really do this by like these are the three ways that I think about doing it, which is helping patients manage their activity to avoid symptom relapses, symptom flare-ups, crashes, also to help them track their long-term trajectory to try and understand, are they getting better, are they getting worse, and then more in like the short term, like what's making them better and what's making them worse. So really trying to help them like measure their response to interventions. So a quick overview of Visible and where we're at right now. So we have, there's really two parts to the Visible platform. We have the free app, and essentially the difference between the free app and Visible Plus is that the free app doesn't use wearable data. It's available on the app stores right now. We actually, as of month 4, we have 25,000 people using it, which is crazy considering, we haven't promoted it at all. This is all through the community, which is really exciting. And with the free app, that helps you measure your body signals in the morning. And I'll talk a bit more in detail about how we do that. And then we help you track your symptoms in the evening and then help spot trends in the illness. And we can do all this actually without the wearable, which is cool. And it's an awesome opportunity to be able to offer something to the whole patient population. And then with the wearable, this is where we use wearable data to help patients manage their activity, and also to measure their condition as well. And I'll talk a bit more in detail about that. And currently we have about 200 beta testers that are using Visible Plus right now, and we're pushing as hard as we can to make that more widely available. And we're really hoping that we can get to a place where it can be publicly available in 3 months. But we're not quite there yet. So to dive in a bit more into how the free app works, we have this framework that we've created around a morning and an evening check-in. And we've really thought about like, how do we don't want people thinking about their condition more than they have to. So how do we try and make it as easy as possible to get the data that is useful to them? So we don't ask people to track it, mid-afternoon, midday, afternoon. Like we're quite strict that actually we think we can get enough data from just that morning and the evening framework. And the morning check-in is where we take a measurement of your biometrics, and in the evening we ask about your symptoms, essentially how the day went. So for the morning check-in, we use this incredible technology that means that you can use just your smartphone camera to pull out your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability by simply putting your finger on your camera lens. And the sensor can actually pick up the changes, those small changes in color in your fingerprint, and translate that into heart rate variability. And it's really accurate as well. So you're talking about 97% accurate compared to a Polar H10. So it's a really cool way to sort of educate people on the power of these insights, and really show them like the value of tracking these objective measurements. And we're happy to talk a bit more in depth about HRV, but we firmly believe with Visible that it's really one of the most accessible biomarkers we have out there in terms of being able to see the trajectory of illnesses. And actually from the data, we also see like resting heart rate, particularly in the more severe patients, is a really good signifier as well of someone's health. I'm happy to speak more about heart rate variability. And then once we have these biometrics from your morning check-in, we can generate the score, and we call this the morning stability score. And really, this is a work in progress for us, but what it allows us to do is tell patients like, how is their body doing? How recovered are they versus like compared to their recent baseline, the last couple of months, like how are they doing? And then they can judge where they've got a bit more capacity for activity, or they really do need to take it slower. And we certainly find that it's very strong at being able to predict when bad days are happening. So we've just updated this algorithm a couple of days ago. We've just tripled its accuracy, and we will continue to improve it. We have the most incredible data set. We've got over 20 million rows of data already on these conditions. And the goal is to start using machine learning to really take factors, not just HRV, not just resting heart rate, but like symptom trends, sleep, to be able to give as close a guidance as we possibly can to people. There's certainly limitations to the score. It's only taken in the morning, so by the afternoon, it's less relevant, and that's one of the reasons why the wearable data is so much more powerful. And then in the evening check-in, you're able to, we ask you about your symptoms, like any treatment, any factors that would influence your condition. So like the menstrual cycle being a really big one, so being able to track that within the app. And then when it's exertion, not just physical exertion, but also cognitive and emotional. And then we're able to show these simple graphs, and we're going to go even further in simplifying this to make it really easy to understand, to spot trends and patterns in your condition, to answer those questions I talked about at the beginning about, am I getting better? Am I getting worse? What's making me better and what's making me worse? Because we also have this ability to compare your symptoms against your exertion, against your biometrics. It's like really giving you the flexibility to try and better understand what's happening with your body. And then this is a work in progress. A lot of this is a work in progress. We are building the ability to export this data to share it with clinicians, and also the ability to, and we know a lot of patients want this, to be able to have that data in their own Excel spreadsheet so they can do their own analysis. But the hope is we can get to a place where Visible is useful enough that people don't need to do that. We're providing the right framework to look at the condition in. So that right now is free to download in the US, the UK, and Germany, and a few other countries. And we do want to expand it. The limitations on the countries, I should explain, is mainly around how big our customer support team is, and they don't speak many languages, in fact, just English. So we just have to be really careful about, especially in this early stages when we've got, the app is what we call an open beta, like we're still working on it. And so we know there's a lot of bugs out there, and we want to be able to respond to everyone within 24 hours if there's an issue, to be able to try and resolve it for them. And we've managed to do that with up to 25,000 people. And so we're just resolving a couple more issues before we spread Visible more widely. And then Visible Plus, which is coming this summer, so in a few months' time. And I mentioned we've got a small test group that are using this, but this is what we're really excited about. This is what we're here for, is like the wearable data and using it, because there's so much potential in this data to be able to help people better manage their conditions. And so the device that right now we're integrating with is a Polar Verity Sense. With the chest strap, you obviously get very accurate data, but it's just really like people don't want to wear it all day. And then if you have something down in the wrist, you actually don't get as high quality data down there. So you've got a nice compromise at the upper arm in being able to get the beat-to-beat intervals, so that HRV continuously streamed to the phone. Because what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to tell people immediately upon overexerting when to slow down. So this is the heart rate monitored framework that Todd Davenport at the Workwell Foundation has helped us build. And what we have is, we call it an overexertion threshold. We think the terminology of like an anaerobic threshold can be sometimes lost on patients. It's like, how do we make this easier to interpret? So we actually have 3 zones. I know like a lot of the other fitness apps out there have, these incredible capabilities, but we're really trying to take a step back and being like, what is best for this use case? And do we need 5 zones? Do we need 10 zones? And really the way we think about it is that rest, exertion, and overexertion is the best way to think about these conditions. And so we use the Workwell Foundation to set default values for these thresholds, but also the ability for patients to be able to tweak that if they want, and also to be able to turn on notifications so that they get them immediately upon overexerting. But also what's quite useful for people is, particularly if you have POTS and you have like these spikes, is to actually delay that notification for a minute or 2 so that you're not getting pinged the whole time. And then alongside that, we've got a measurement for exertion that we're calling pace points. This is a cumulative score of your heart rate over time. And that's what we use to help you measure and plan your day. And what we can do with the pace points is quite cool. We can set budgets so we don't want to go over it. And we can use like a similar user interface to what you see in banking apps when they're trying to stop you from going, your monthly expenditure from spending too much. We can do the same, but for your daily expenditure of your energy budget, essentially. And so we have what we call a pace setter. I don't know if you can see it on this screen, but we essentially have a pace setter that moves around the donut throughout the day. And what you're trying to do is make sure your pace points don't go over, or if they do, you know, by the end of the day, you need to take it a little bit easier. So it's just about sort of smoothing out your activity throughout the day, so you're not seeing these big spikes that can cause these symptom flare-ups. And then alongside that, we have also happening in the background, we have, and I've talked about management of these conditions, and I can definitely speak a bit more about like where we want to go with that, because there is lots of opportunity not just to build upon Workwell's the Workwell Foundation's framework of heart rate limit alerts and trying to be more dynamic and personalized to users. So like calibrating to then starting to do symptom flare-up prediction. There's some really cool stuff that we can do from the data that we're seeing already, which is exciting. But as part of that work, we need to be able to measure these conditions. We need to be able to know, what's making people better, what's making them worse. So what can we tell from the wearable data? And so time spent upright is a really good indicator of illness severity. It's something that Bateman Horne Center has done a bunch of research on, and that's something that we're building into the app. And particularly at the severe end, it makes a lot of sense to be measuring that rather than steps. And then also, like I mentioned, POTS and the ability to see those spikes. And it doesn't make sense that you would go and get your autonomic nervous system tested on a tilt table test when essentially your wearable is picking up you doing your own tilt table test every time you go from lying down to standing up. And so the ability to like continuously measure a fluctuating long-term condition using wearable data just makes so much sense for these conditions versus these like single time point tests where either everything comes back normal, or if there is an issue, it's like it doesn't relate to the direction your condition could go in the following couple of weeks and months. So that was all I had on Visible and the free app. And plus, I've spoken a little bit about like our background and the team and our motivations, and happy to speak more about like where we want to take Visible. But yeah, Amy, anything I can add?
I have a question just about the heart rate variability and the use of the camera lens. Do you guys have any indication about the accuracy with darker skin?
No, we haven't got data on that, unfortunately.
I didn't know if anybody had otherwise had done studies with that to know if it was as effective.
Funny you asked that, Sally, because I had the same question about knowing that people with Ehlers-Danlos also have difficulty with fingerprints. So a lot of times, people will have difficulty using their finger on an iPad or having the fingerprint come up on ID. So that was the first thing that came to my mind too.
Yeah, that's for sure. And there are absolutely limitations to the camera reading, and that's really why, for multiple reasons, the wearable just makes so much sense. You're measuring continuously, passively, more accurately. There are a bunch of reasons to use it, but we always felt it was important that we could still offer something for free to the community and sort of demonstrate the power of these biometrics. And so that's why we've included that in the free app.
Eric, do you mind closing your screen so we can see it? Yeah. I have a couple questions. I don't know how much you know about this group, but a lot of us that are co-founders and early members and members now, not only are we therapists, but we also have ME or long COVID. So a lot of us we know Todd very well, and we've always taught Workwell Foundation's approach to heart rate biofeedback. So I have a couple of questions. Heart rate variability is a fairly new concept for me. I want to understand more about it, but have there been any studies specifically in ME or long COVID when it comes to heart rate variability?
Yeah, there has. And actually, if it's still working, there is makevisible.com/HRV. We've listed out a couple of the studies that have correlated HRV with symptom severity in ME, and there's a similar study in long COVID as well.
Okay.
HRV is a tough one to get your head around. It's slightly counterintuitive in the you'd think you'd want your heartbeat to be more like metronomic. You know, if you had 60 beats per minute heart rate, you'd expect it to like beat every second. And it's like actually that variability, or that ability of your body to be like flexible and adapt between these like 0.8 seconds beat, 1.2 seconds beat, because there's a really good indicator of health. So it is powerful, but interestingly, resting heart rate also should not be left out of the conversation. We see that also as being like really strong indicator of people's health.
Right. And I had another question. Dr. Vernon spoke to us about HUA, hours of upright activity. And I'm just curious, with your Visible Plus, how will you be measuring hours of upright activity?
So in this first instance, it's going to be, because I think I know where you're going with this, is that there's limitations in that we can tell that your upper body is upright. So that's something that we can easily do with a wearable. But that isn't always fantastic for POTS, where, you know, sometimes you'll be upright, but you'd still like maybe you're sitting up in bed. But there is the ability to then iterate that. A version 2 of that will be to take into account like standing up alongside the like sitting up in bed version. Yeah.
Hey, just a couple comments. One with the tilt table,
Yep.
just to give a plug to actually doing sometimes the formal tilt table testing, because like for my son has ME, and that was what finally pushed him over to get Social Security benefits. So so I just would want to kind of put that out there for people to remember that too.
Totally, and I think these kind of measurements are so powerful, right? This is objective measurements of this condition, and that is what, like, in the absence of a blood biomarker, that is real gold for us. Yeah. And what we're trying to do at Visible is like make that more widely known, and if we really empower patients to measure it and go to their PCPs in the UK, the GPs, and show them like, hey, like this is not normal. Look how much my autonomic nervous system is dysfunctioning. Then hopefully they will get to do a tilt table test as well. And we certainly, when we think about what we're doing and the direction we want to go, like we want to align a lot of our work with research. So really we want to correlate everything we're doing with Visible and validate that against a tilt table test. So that will be as good as the dream.
Great. Just over time, like I imagine you'll need to just do upgrades to your programming as you learn more, or tweak it tighter. Yeah, I would assume that's built in to what you're doing.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's probably a good opportunity to speak about like our pricing model, is that it is a monthly subscription, and it's a monthly subscription particularly because of that, because all of the updates that we'll be doing in the background is with our software engineers and our data scientists, and it is an ongoing, and Visible will be, you know, it'll be a long time before we're at the place where we're like, okay, like we're built the best that we can do. I think we've got years of work ahead of us.
What's the other thing I was thinking about? Just in comparing data with other people, you don't know like what medications people are on, what supplements they're on. Well, just curious questions that kind of were going through my head with that. And also, what is the cost of your monthly app right now, the Plus?
So just to answer your first one, you can track your treatments that you're on. So we do have an idea if someone is on like a beta blocker and they type that into the app, like we will know that, which is really helpful. In terms of pricing, we haven't announced pricing for the wider version yet, but I expect it to be in a, you know, similar to like Netflix or, you know, sort of your classic software subscriptions.
I have a question.
Hi, Samantha. Yeah.
I'm a clinician, but I also have long COVID. So I've been using the Visible app. One of my biggest questions is when it's asking me how my sleep was the night before, am I going on how I perceived my sleep to be, or how my sleep was with my Garmin? Like which one am I supposed to be putting in?
So we actually recently added an info little I button. I don't know if you've noticed it, that now sits next to that question to give a little bit more of an insight into what we're asking. And I won't off the top of my head be able to remember exactly the words that we use. But yeah, that's asking you, like, based on your perspective of your symptoms, of your sleep. So taking into account when you went to bed, how many times you got up during the night, and how you feel when you woke up. It's all encapsulated in that. And there's a longer and much more eloquently written sentence there about that question and giving it a little bit more detail. Because I do appreciate that question is asked quite a bit, as well as people ask when we're rating symptoms, am I rating that against my baseline, or am I rating that against like pre-COVID Harry? And particularly people who are early on in their journey, they're more likely to want to rate it against their like pre-illness state. But right now, what we're looking for in the data and what is helpful for us in our algorithms is knowing the like relative change. So it's not so much like absolute change. It's like how are things changing day to day and versus your baseline from the past 3 months.
On that, I have a question about, are you grabbing information on people that come in early, like maybe they're 2 months in their illness and then drop off after 8 months? Are you able to capture those pieces just to document the wellness piece of it?
Yeah, so we are about to introduce a question that asks people when did their symptoms first start, so that we can better bunch up the cohort, so we can better understand like the recovery profiles for different patients. But it's not something that we have in the app right now, and it's absolutely some data that I think is really crucial. I think the 2 bits of data right now that we have, that we don't have in the app, is a Bell scale when you first sign up, and also when your illness first started, because those are quite big. They're big factors in like what your experience is as a patient.
So from
And then also, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was about to ask about measuring the HIV continuously rather than taking only morning measurements. Because so why to measure continuously? Maybe you covered this, but my brain overlooked it. But I'm asking because there tends to be a lot of fluctuation in HIV during a day, so I think that it might affect on the interpretation quite a lot.
Yeah, totally agree. So in the morning, we have like a really nice controlled environment for something as sensitive as HRV. We're able to try and reduce the sensitivity. And like, as you get further into the day, you've got more stresses. It becomes difficult to have HRV that is reliable or that we can do anything useful with. Why we capture HRV continuously, we're not actually using it in the app at all, and we don't currently use it in Visible Plus. But what we're looking at, to give you a bit of insight, when we look at the data, there are ways that you can measure exertion. The obvious one is to use heart rate, but the heart rate isn't always great, particularly if you've got POTS. It doesn't actually correlate exactly with how much you've exerted. But what we can pull out from the B2B intervals are things like breathing rate. So we can start looking at that as a measure of exertion alongside heart rate, alongside just general like accelerometer movement of the device itself. So there's some really cool things that we can do that we're like quite excited about, and having the beat to beat intervals all day is just like that extra layer of data that gives us way more insight than you're going to get from your Fitbit, whatever other devices out there that are just doing heart rate.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
and from a strictly a clinician standpoint, are you going to have like a professional model that we could, like, let's say, put on a patient to wear for a month, but then we could transfer it to another patient?
Yeah, so we actually currently have a pilot program with a clinic in the UK to do that. And that's the exact model that they're looking at, which is they want to send a device out a month in advance and then have that data available to them in a clinician dashboard by the time the patient actually comes at that appointment, and then to continue using Visible for as long as it's helpful for that patient. So yeah, it's absolutely something that we're looking at.
Okay.
I think the way that to like speak a bit more about like why we've chosen to go the direction we've gone, like we're in the business world, we've gone like direct to the patients rather than going via into the healthcare system. And for us, that was a decision that was like, there's so much demand right now, and it's just so much easier to access that. And we know the healthcare system is going to catch up. Like really, with as many people impacted by long COVID as we have over the last couple of years, we will start seeing more of that demand come from the healthcare system. But for now, we're sort of going direct to patients, building up the evidence base, validating what we're doing, and then we'll slowly build out more and more tools for clinicians, because we do want to work more closely, with the Workwell Foundation, with with David Petrino, and all of that takes us down the route of becoming more and more integrated with healthcare. And in the UK, if anyone that's in the UK, our long-term vision is that you get prescribed Visible, and no one has to pay for it.
Can you describe the monitor, and is it exchangeable with the chest strap? Because I understand it's an arm band.
Yeah, so it uses similar software to the chest strap. We actually haven't done any work to make sure it's compatible with the Polar H10. And that's really because we do think the Verity is the right way to go here. And if you use the Polar H10, I mean, that's great for the morning reading, and people might want it for that. But it doesn't serve us in the long term, which is where we want to get people to, which is wearing it all day, every day. Because I appreciate a lot of people already have Polar H10s, and it feels like an unnecessary purchase to have to get Verity on top of that. We've just tried to really look at this from first principles, well, what is the best thing long term for this condition? And so we haven't compromised on that vision, I guess, is one way of saying it. But that's not to say in the future that we don't have more capacity and more resources to be able to support the H10.
And the Verity is sold separately from the app. It doesn't come through.
So for our 200 users that we currently have, we've done it so that we send out the device for them. We package them up in boxes, so you don't have someone on the front going for a run or with a rippling six-pack. It's very much a visible experience. And we also include a charger, and we take out the swim clip, which you don't need. And what that allows us to do is actually offer it for cheaper than Polar, which is great.
Do you have a platform that therapists or any clinician is able to use so that they can kind of browse around just to get an idea of it and not have to come up with their own account? Because we know we don't want to skew your data, but at least to be able to get familiar with some of the tools on the sites.
I mean, I really appreciate that, because it is definitely a really good point. And actually, it's a very good point when we were sub 1,000 users. Definitely, we were quite conscious about people using it. But now we're at 25,000. We've got such a big data set that I think if the odd person goes on, we're not too worried. But so I'd still recommend downloading the free app and playing around with it. And you can always delete it at the your account if you want at the end. But actually, it's a really valid point that we should have a tick box that can be I'm healthy, because one of the things that we want to do in the future is to be able to have healthy controls that we're looking at our data against. And so we are going to, at some point, I suspect, do a bit of a program where we ask people to, invite a friend on who's healthy, who can input their data and share their data alongside it. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about skewing our data.
And then also, is there an age, minimum age that you are taking? What are your guidelines for that?
Yeah, so right now it is over 18 is what we currently have in the app, and that's more to do with the App Store process, where if we're building stuff for people under 18, we have to go through a different process, and we haven't been through that process yet. That's not to say anything that we're building isn't relevant to kids, and it's something that definitely is like on our roadmap to make sure that we're not excluding. I think it's been really one of the challenges with Visible has been, you know, how do we build a really inclusive platform that works for everyone and still actually be able to like deliver value and be able to like actually like build Visible. So it's been tough to, like, for example, like what we're building also makes sense for chronic line fibro. There's like these other conditions, and we've tried to be quite focused. And so it's frustrating to be like, we don't support kids right now, but it's more like a resources issue. And I hope that we can get to a point where we can do it within the next year. But yeah, if you put them down as 18-year-olds, we can't really tell the difference on our end. So that's one way around it. Any other questions?
Well, this is really, really awesome information, and I think so useful. Everybody's always looking for tools, you know, that are applicable, as opposed to just more hypotheses of, you know, what's behind something. And so really appreciate this.
And I think is a good like analogy. You look at the like other chronic illnesses, you look at like diabetes, you have the devices, the best platforms, the best technologies that exist to help people measure and manage their glucose levels. And really what we're building with Visible is like the best technology that exists to help measure and manage your nervous system and your activity.
Hi Harry, I'm Anel. I've used the app since November last year, and
nice.
I find it incredibly helpful. Had very, very little support from the NHS, and this is really my rock that I'm kind of guiding my pacing on, and it's getting better and better and more sensitive. So it's coming closer and closer to what I experience on a daily basis. So just want to say enormous thank you. And be fantastic if you can open it up to the pediatric world as well, as I'm a pediatric physio. Be really great.
We will do. Good to hear. And yeah, I think it's definitely really important to iterate, like that we will keep improving and building on Visible. I think what we're doing is a slightly unique situation where I think, you know, most other companies would wait until they'd like finished the product or it was like perfect. And we haven't done that at all. We've been quite open and gone out with like our beta, and it's been really awesome to like work with the community to be able to do that. And I just think it's so important that we get this stuff out sooner rather than later. And you know, we will make it perfect with time, and it just might take us a while to get there.
Perry, I'd like to thank you also. I've had ME for a really long time. So as technology has evolved, you know, I've tried lots of different devices, and, you know, the challenge is to get around the settings for help the individual to set the alarms, whatever, you know, so they'll go off lower, you know, instead of higher. So when I recently downloaded your app and started, I'm still in the first few days, you know, where you're taking baseline, but it's just really nice and refreshing, you know, that it's from the very get-go, you know, it's easy to submit your data and everything because you're looking at ME and long COVID instead of, you know, I'm not using the same app that a long distance runner is, you know, using every morning before they go on their run. So
yeah,
I
think when I think about what we're building, it's like 50% of it is actually just reframing a lot of this information. So we're not having to do the mental gymnastics. And I think the next 50% is around building out the algorithms and the digital biomarkers. So I'm excited for us to be at the beginning of that journey now.
As David Petrino says, we haven't been asking the right questions. So I think you are definitely asking the right questions.
Yeah, I think it's badly needed. It's still blows my mind how little support and options there are out there for patients. And I remain very optimistic. I mean, even the existence of Visible is, I think, shows that things are changing. And I think there's a place for charities, there's a place for our institutions, but I also think there's like this incredible opportunity with startups where we can move really fast, and we have incredibly talented data scientists. Our data lead Rory is he's actually got previously severe ME, now mild, and he like ex-Cambridge, double first in statistics and maths, like super smart guy. So it's really cool to be able to get people as talented as him and as motivated as him to be working on this. So very, very much a patient-led effort, this, and like we're really open to feedback. There is a direct line to the team in the profile section of the app. You can tap help and feedback, and you'll get connected with the team. We always respond, and we'll get back within 24 hours. And I promise you, we really read every single message. And so whatever bit of feedback you guys have, it will be logged in our minds, and it will help us make decisions going forwards.
That's one thing I noticed too, was that I think you guys did a really great job on the graphics, and very ME friendly, long COVID friendly for any kind of cognitive work. Really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we don't overcomplicate it. I think there is definitely like the fitness platforms are like for the people that are trying to really hyper optimize their health. They want to look at every single aspect of it, but that's not really the use case here. Like we want to live our lives. Like, what's the least amount of data and the least amount of tracking I have to do to be able to get the most out of life and reduce my symptoms. And so the free app is quite basic, but I think that's really important, that it is really easy to use and obvious. And we're definitely, like any new feature or thing that we build, we always like ask ourselves that, like, do we definitely need this? Like, is this really going to be helpful for the majority of patients? Yeah, I definitely hope everyone keeps us accountable to that. And if it starts getting too complicated, you'll have to let us know.
One piece that I appreciate.
Yeah. And I should add to that, one of the things that we're doing now is actually building out onboarding and the information, so that it's easier for new users, because we appreciate we sort of launched the app and it kind of had the functionality, but it didn't really have much context on, like, what the hell's HRV, and like, how should I be interpreting this? And over the next couple of weeks, we'll be building out a journey for newer users to better help them understand what's going on when they join the app.
What I guess I would like to add is I appreciate that even though this may not be ideal for people that have severe and very severe, it can at least help them capture the how fragile they are in different zones, and how much a little bit of exertion will cause a big response. And so even though you might not be capturing some big ADL activity where they are really, doing self-care or doing something where they might want to be able to put that down on their checklist of things that I've done today. But just by saying, what, today was a day that your heart rate was really unstable, you can't expect yourself to feel guilty and you didn't get your activity done, but this is the reason why. And I think that can give a lot of information to the individual to say, in this circumstance, your body is too fragile. Yeah. And when your body is more stable, when your heart rate is stable, you are able to grow on that, but not when it's in this zone of instability. And that, I think, just gives the person who already feels defeated a little bit of feedback to say, you might not have felt it, but your heart was really racing. Yeah. Or even like adding in barometric pressure. Your body is responding to the storm that's coming in a few hours. This is why you need to start paying attention. So even adding, barometric pressure tracker from the Weather Channel is a really good way just to put that piece into it, to say a storm is coming, or in the next 12 hours, this is going to be really affecting your body.
And there's so many data streams that are out there that we can hook up to Visible to be able to do things like that. And it's definitely something, we're thinking about. But yeah, I agree. I think, again, like we're really obsessed at Visible is like objective measurements. Like, how do we move away from self-reported symptoms to just being able to tell people like, this is what is going on. I think that would be hugely validating.
I want to go back to what you said about building out right before Amy spoke. One of the things that I see in the patient groups where they are focusing on heart rate feedback, and whether it's heart rate variability or heart rate, is that there are a group, and you're probably well aware of this, but there's a group of patients that are very tech savvy and very still cognitively able to manipulate the data and understand what's happening. Some of them, I think it's partially their age and they are accustomed to things. And then some of them, it's just that they're functioning better at that level. And then there's another group that they can get an app downloaded, but then they just are lost when it comes to what to do with the information. And they might understand the concept when you discuss heart rate pacing, but they don't understand what's coming through the app itself. And what I've been really, hoping, and this is so awesome that you're here, because, I think one of the things is that clinicians, when a patient is that cognitively impaired or limited technology wise, this is where clinicians come in and can help them. But also the quality of you guys' design makes it so that it's clear what's going on from the start. But I also think that if you guys, and I think that's what you were talking about, having some really just super simple, whether it's videos or whatever you guys decide is appropriate, but, how to, and what does this mean, like down to the, kind of the old dummy books, like, because people ask these questions in these groups that are just so painfully simple, they're just so lost and they're trying so hard. And then nobody in these groups, nobody really wants to help them because, they'll say stuff like, it's in the files, go read it, and it's like, well, obviously, if I could read it, I'd figure it out.
No, I agree, and I think when I say, we take on board a lot of feedback with Visible, and definitely one of the things that we have to be careful of is that there can often be a vocal group that are extremely tech savvy and want all the bells and whistles, but it's like that, still thinking like, is that going to make it more complicated for new users? So it's definitely like a really tough one for us to balance. And my bias is, and I always say this to the team, it's like, if the complaint with Visible is that it's too simple, I think we've done our job well. I think we should always bias towards that, because if we really want to impact a lot of patients' lives, we need to be building for the 80% and 90% rather than the more vocal tech savvy 10%. So yeah, it's just one of those tough things for us to balance and try and get right. But yeah, I agree, and we are going to do videos as well. We're going to. I've signed myself up to be doing some intro videos, and I'm going to try and sign Todd up to do a few as well. So we can have and I think this is also what's missing, is a bit more of a definitive guide. And certainly the further into the journey we get with Visible, we will be looking to create more content and really be the go-to place for trying to pace. And we'll be making sure we keep it digestible, simple, as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you. That's just wonderful to hear, because I just feel like that population of people is already so isolated, even, they're isolated even more already. And
yeah, no, I totally agree.
And then there's the population of whom my friend is one. We were talking the other day. She's had ME for a really, really long time. And I told her about Visible and that she might want to try it because she's going through, she's going through like, she's not as doing as well, which, ME, long COVID, the episodic type things. But she takes her episodes very personally, and I asked her if she did any heart rate biofeedback pacing or anything like that, and she tries, but like if it shows a decline in her ability, she takes it very personally. She's like, what did I do? And I'm like, well, like Amy was saying, when it should, that information hopefully will make someone feel better, like this was going on and this was going on, but it's like, you really can't blame yourself that your heart rate variability dropped. I mean, it's like checking your glucose. If you're a diabetic, it's a feedback, but it's not meant for you as a tool for you to berate yourself for something that you've done, but also just to make you aware of it. And then the other thing she did admit was, if she checked in and the numbers weren't good and there was something she really wanted to do, then she was angry that she couldn't do it. So hopefully, and so people like her, I've just learned for people like her, the symptoms, sometimes just going monitoring your body symptoms, like getting, that you notice your breath is increasing and things are not under the very easy category. For people like her, that's what I usually try to focus on more than some type of metric biofeedback like you have. But hopefully, people will be, one, be gentle with themselves and not blame themselves, but also that it'll be a wake-up call for people to actually see, I'm doing too much and I need, here's proof, and I need to back up and slow down, or I'm headed for something bigger than this.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, right? If you give people more these tools, so they end up, and I think Todd has previously talked about this a bit as well, which is like, if there's too much emphasis on lifestyle, it can feel like patients end up blaming themselves. And so it's definitely something like we think a lot about as well. It's like, we need to make sure that we're only helping. And, do we need to reframe how we talk about those like 1s and 2s that we can give through the stability score? Because that is, it can be quite negative for people, to wake up and see that in the morning. And it's definitely like a tough balance for us to get right, to make sure we're building something that is like positive, but we're not over promising, and that there's definitely like no blame attached. If things are going backwards, it's not because they've done something wrong. It's a really tough space to try and get right. One of the things that we did is we wrote a blog post a while ago about how we talk about these illnesses, and we've done a lot of work on like what we call like a tone of voice, like how do we talk with patients, like how do we we don't talk about recovery, we talk more like we talk about progress. There's like certain ways of talking about stuff that trying to avoid situations like that. So we do think about this kind of stuff a lot, and I think it's not just in like the design, it's also in like the words that we choose to use. So also very happy to get feedback on that as well. If there are things that you guys see in the app, you're like, oh, that doesn't quite make me feel good. You guys haven't quite written this right in the right way. And for example, the heart rate alerts, like, should we be calling them alerts? It's like, we want to alert people not to overdo it, but we don't want to cause like anxiety and like the stress of those notifications happening all the time. So it's a really tough one for us to get right.
I think it's important too that this can as obviously letting the person know what they're doing and overdoing, but for family members and friends and caregivers to go so that they learn that they look
Yes.
fine on the outside potentially, but they're not. And I think that just can help take away that you're faking it, or really you can't, which is huge. You know, my son always says, imagine the worst flu you can imagine. And then now what did you want to go do? So
and it's actually been as a lot of we see a lot of feedback with people asking for that, and a lot of carers as well asking for the ability to do that. And again, like my obsession with like objective data, like the power to change people's opinions on these conditions, I think is huge, because you can share it, show it with your doctor, you can show it to your friends and family, your carers, and they don't have to ask you that dreaded question every day, like, how are you doing? They can look at the numbers, and that's where we want to get to. And we've got a bit of a ways to get there, but hopefully with you guys' help, we can get there soonish.
It just really validates people. So
yeah.
How are you fading? I'm looking at you. You're starting that luck.
It's 7 o'clock here, so it is towards the end of the day for me. Yeah, okay. the joys of trying to build a company as fast as possible that helps people to slow down. It's like, there's some irony in it.
Well, this has been delightful, but I think I'm gonna bounce off just to kind of make sure you get released.
Yeah,
All
this
right.
has been awesome, Harry. Thank you for taking the time and energy to do this. And we'll put this up on our YouTube page, so our other group members and others can take a look at it. And I think you're in our group, so is it okay if people tag you if they have questions?
Absolutely. I mean, if they've got issues with the app, I would always point them towards the support for the within the app, but like high level questions, happy to answer.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye bye.
Thank you everybody for